events, what happened, the formation of the platoon, who they were, what McEwen had done on this particular day, this particular Sunday. There was an issue of alcohol involved, and I talk about that to some degree, the reasons for his frustration, and then the events immediately after. We've already talked about going into the waters. Now, what happened that evening afterward, and the next day, and the next couple of days, and then the institutional reaction of the Marine Corps the next day, headquarters. What are they going to do? How are they going to address this? Here, the Marine Corps is already in jeopardy. Now we got this incident. The commandant has to make a very major decision, and he's been criticized for this, and I deal with this in my analysis of it. Commandant, on the one hand, is advised to go to Parris Island, go down there, show that you're concerned about this situation, show control of it. On the other hand, the other advisors say, don't go near it, don't touch it, it'll blow over. Leave it alone. Don't make it a bigger deal than it already is. That, I think, is generally the consensus that he should have stayed away from it. I don't agree with that. I think he did the right thing to come down there. But when he got there, he made a major error, and he, in effect, declared that McEwen was guilty and would be punished to the fullest extent of the law. This is the man who has the duty to call a court-martial. He's already decided the fate of the drill instructor the next day, in effect. And he then could not convene a court-martial. The Secretary of the Navy actually had to do it at that time. So we talk about that a little bit, and so forth, and bring it up. In the last half of the book is devoted more to the court-martial itself. McEwen had a lawyer named Emil Zola Berman, wonderful, very wonderful name, very capable lawyer. Human interest story, I thought. Zola Berman is a Jew from New York City, a socialist, comes from a family of radicals, European immigrants over here, and he is selected to come down and defend Matthew McEwen, an Irish guy from Worcester, Massachusetts, who is, in Berman's eyes, and the eyes of several other people, is being persecuted by the Institutional Marine Corps, which is, I guess, at that time was WASPy, if I can use that term. So we've got some cultural issues going on here. Berman turns out to be greeted and treated very nicely down here. And he's matched by two prosecutors who are both lawyers, but neither of them is a full-time prosecutor. One was a tanker, and the other guy was in something else. They were both up at Camp Lejeune at the time. So Berman was a very skilled trial lawyer, and you see it in the course of the trial. The next thing that I, as an author, have to think about is I'm a lawyer. I'm not writing this book just for lawyers. How can I write it in a way that might be interesting to the general public? And at the same time, I've got to integrate some of the legal concepts that were going on, at least the major ones that affected the outcome. I've got to quote, I obtained the transcript of the court-martial under the Freedom of Information Act. I got that, and that was a wonderful resource, of course. To be able to quote from the transcript in a way that wouldn't bore people, you know, it wasn't too long, it wasn't too technical at all. So that was the challenge, I think, in dealing with that part of it. And then at the end, I decided that in fairness and that it was appropriate that I address some of these controversial issues and at least give my opinion. And you can tell the facts as you can best glean them, tell the truth as you see it, as impartially as you can and objectively as you can, and in as interesting a fashion as you can. But I think it's important that the author take something of a stand and a perspective on it, as long as it's clear that you're talking about opinion. And I did that. I did that about the issue of alcohol in there. I did it about the commandant's decision to come to Parris Island. Was it the right thing to do? and a bit about the outcome. And one of the things that I also touched on and I thought was very significant was Chesty Puller came down to testify in this case on behalf of the drill instructor. And the commandant, who by the time of the court-martial, four months later, by that time the topic had pretty much blown over, and the Marine Corps had gotten through the worst of it for various reasons, including its political connections in Washington. The commandant was now wanted to just get rid of this case. Didn't want to hang McEwen out to dry, just wanted to go away. So he comes down as a defense witness. He comes as a defense witness, and what he was almost forced to do that because Berman, the defense lawyer, was so skilled. He said, I've got 80-some-odd former DIs. I can put them all in the witness stand to testify that it was common practice to take these guys, take recruits into the waters down there. And I think it was common practice, as well as some other practices. When Wallace Green came down shortly after this incident, a new CG, he found 10 recruits in the hospital with broken noses or broken jaws from DIs. This. I mean, the Marine Corps had done nothing about this stuff. And Berman said, I don't want to punish the Marine Corps, but he said, if we have to put the Marine Corps on trial, we'll do that to protect my client. And so he was able to bring the commandant around on this thing. It was quite interesting. But then the reverse twist is this. Here's Chesty Puller, one of the greatest Marines of all time, comes in and testifies that it was a great mistake to ever have court-martialed McEwen. And the commandant says, well, maybe they ought to take a stripe away from it at this time. And the court itself, composed of, it was a general court-martial, it's composed of 6 Marine officers and a Navy physician, are there. They've gotten what amounts to a command, almost. This is a command decision. Either let this guy off or maybe take a stripe away. And they didn't do that. They didn't do that. And that was an extremely courageous move on their part, I thought. I talked to the Navy doctor who was on the panel, Dr. Nelson, and he said he just admired those Marine officers. He said they had the courage to do what they thought was right. And he said their careers were on the line. They did it. And I didn't follow up on that. It would be an interesting, that would be an interesting follow-up story as to what happened to the careers of those 6.
Definitely.
But anyway, that was the story, and that's where I did it. Anytime you want a break is fine with me, because I keep on talking for as long as you want here. The next phase is, incidentally, by the way, my wife says, get on the computer and, don't this out. I'm too old for that. For me, I wrote in hand, which is a very anachronistic way to do it, but I think it's important to write the way that you feel most comfortable. And the way I had practiced law for a long time was I would not handwrite a whole thing, but I'd handwrite bullets if I wanted to write something, and then I was used to dictating it. I was comfortable with a dictating machine, so that's the way I did it. Except in this case, I did actually handwrite out the whole draft, and then I dictated. I had a secretary, and we'd go back over it and edit it and color it out and put it in better form. And so I finally had a manuscript. But then, yeah, that's nice. A big stack of papers and a wonderful experience in putting it together. But now came the hardest part, and that was finding a publisher.
That must have been extremely difficult for a book of this nature. What might be a good idea is for us to go ahead and take a break, and then we can come back, and I'm sure that people have some questions about what you've already asked, or what you've already talked about. So we'll take a break, we'll come back and ask some questions about the writing process and what questions they might have about the story itself, and then we can move on to the publishing part.
Good.
How does that sound?
Sounds great.
Okay, well, we'll reconvene then about, how about 5 or 10 after? That way everybody's got a chance to go over to the store and pick something up if you'd like something to snack on.